Obviously, it's election season here in Canada. Just a matter of weeks before we go to the polls, April 28th. And the candidates are all out. They're doing campaign stops. They're doing false, policy promises. Hey, if you vote for me, you'll get this, even though down the road, we kind of know that's not going to happen. But Mark Carney made an extra special trip. So this is from PBS News. Carney laments Canada's lost friendship with U.S. in town that sheltered Americans after 9/11. So Mark Carney went over to the town. If you ever seen the musical Come From Away, you know what this is about. Mark Carney went to that town to try to exemplify and try to shame America by saying that, hey, once upon a time, Canadians helped you out. And now you're treating us like this. So, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney lamented Canada's lost friendship with the United States as he visited the town that sheltered thousands of stranded American airline passengers after the 9/11 attacks. Carney's visit Monday to Gander, Newfoundland, on the second day of the national election campaign comes against the backdrop of a trade war and sovereignty threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump's almost daily attacks on Canada's sovereignty have left Canadians feeling betrayed. Again, ignoring the fact that we wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for this horrible Liberal Party that are now taking advantage of this trade war. It literally is Stockholm syndrome that people are supporting the Liberal Party that got them into this position. In this crisis caused by the United States president and those who are enabling him, we lament a friendship lost, Carney said. In Gander, Canadians did extraordinary things for Americans when they needed it. Now we need to go to extraordinary things for ourselves. Gander opened its arms to nearly 6,600 airline passengers diverted when the United States government shut down airspace during 9/11. In a matter of a few hours, the town population of 10,000 in 2001 was overwhelmed by 38 plane loads of travelers, yet locals went to work in their kitchens and cleaned up spare rooms to offer space and food to newcomers. When more than 200 flights were diverted to Canada following the attacks on the United States, the Canadians shunted the traffic away from Toronto and Montreal to the eastern seaboard. Obscure little used Gander got to relieve its glory days as a stopover point for transatlantic aviation before long distance flights became possible. Built in 1938 in anticipation of the coming World War, it had the world's longest runway, and on 9/11, it was the second busiest, taking in 38 flights to Halifax, Nova Scotia. 7. Carney noted Canadians have been always been by America's side, whether it was during the Iranian hostage crisis or more recently during the California wildfires or in Afghanistan, where Canada lost 158 members of the armed forces and 7 civilians. Trump has declared a trade war on its northern neighbor and continues to call for Canada to become the 50th state, a position that has infuriated Canadians. The American president has threatened economic coercion on its annexation threats and suggested the border is a fictional line. Trump put 25%, but also, this is what's so confusing about this, and I don't know if Trump's actually legitimately serious about this, is every time Trump makes a sovereignty threat on Canada, he then follows up with, well, we don't need things from Canada. So I don't really know what position. I can't, I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychoanalyst for Trump. But for him to say that he wants to remove the fictional line, even though he is supposed to be Mr. Border Security, and claim Canada as a 51st state, yet at the same time says we don't need anything from Canada, not energy, not automotive parts, nothing. So it's very confusing. It's very confusing. But the Liberal Party is going to take advantage of this. Instead of actually going to Donald Trump and telling him this story. Honest to God, someone should just go to the White House and explain the story to the United States and say that this has been a friendship that's been the longest standing friendship for a long time. And we have worked together on situations like this. Trump put 25% tariffs on Canada's steel and aluminum and is threatening sweeping tariffs on all Canadian products as well as all of America's trading partners on April 2nd. Carney said Canadians are over the shock of betrayal, but now have looked out for themselves. He said Canadians and Americans have been traditionally been like brothers, but that has changed. And it wasn't us who did the changing. Unfortunately, President Trump's actions have put that kingship under greater strain today than at any point in our story history, Carney said. Carney and his conservative opponent, Pierre Poilievre, said Trump must respect Canada's sovereignty as they kicked off. He's pointing the finger at Trump to to respect Canada's sovereignty. The central banker that they installed, the central banker that rigged his own election. You want to talk about Canadian sovereignty? Our sovereignty is already eroding away from the WEF, from global institutions that have captured the Canadian Parliament. And that's why Trump is kind of eyeing this, because he knows that the Canadian Parliament is not its own independent sovereignty. It has been captured. It has been corrupted, like a lot of other nations. All stuff that they won't tell you on the news, but they'll tell you to go out and chant elbows up and threaten people that aren't part of this. Carney still hasn't had a phone call with Trump and suggested that might not happen until after the election. After the election. So whether or not Mark Carney is installed in to become prime minister is when they'll decide to actually take matter into their own hands. Again, that's why they're not doing jack squat about this trade war. They want to make it worse. Canada wants to make it worse. All they have to do is send someone down there and negotiate with Trump. All you have to do. But they don't want to do that because Mark Carney is going to use this to his advantage, use this as leverage to get more votes so he's confirmed. I'm available for a call, but we are going to talk on our terms as a sovereign country, not what he pretends we are, Carney said. But now, Mark Carney, who just gave you that sob story about how the Canadian-American partnership is kind of fading away and Donald Trump's wrecking it, and we've been we're like blood brothers. We're very similar. We're simpatico. We helped you out during times of need. And now here's Mark Carney announcing to the public that Canada and United States relationship is gone. Trump did not say that. Carney is saying that. Trump's not saying that we want to eliminate the relationship between Canada. He's saying that we need to work something out. Carney is the one that's suggesting, hey, we just cut America out completely. Listen to this.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We have power. We are masters in our own home. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous. We can control our destiny. We can give ourselves much more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away.
So, if he's bragging about how powerful and strong we are and we could do anything, make this country prosperous, why aren't you doing anything about the fentanyl crisis? Why aren't you doing anything about border security? How about doing something for infrastructure that's collapsing in this country? How about doing something for healthcare that's deteriorating across province to province? How about all those phony promises you gave Alberta? Why don't you actually stick to them instead of trying to further divide them? And Saskatchewan, two of our biggest, natural resource entities in this country come from Alberta and Saskatchewan. And this guy wants to divide it away. This guy continues to push it away, making false promises to Daniel Smith, making false promises to Premier Scott Moe, and then turning away from it. If he's legit serious about running this country and legit serious about being a proud Canadian, you'd be supporting everything that would make Canada more prosperous. And miraculously, it's also something that Trump would want. Because if people remember, the original tariff threat that came from Donald Trump was an ultimatum mentioning the fentanyl crisis, mentioning that, hey, we can remove the tariffs, we can negotiate if you fix your border crisis. So that drugs and illegal criminals and cartels and organized crime doesn't come from your country into mine. It's really that simple, folks. It's really that simple. But you know who's not going to comply with it because he's so stubborn, because he's so a narcissist and wants to install himself and take advantage and milk this until the election? Mark Carney. This bastard. This guy who cheated himself into this race, who came out of nowhere, a central banker, makes millions and millions of dollars betraying the country, is pretending he wants to save this country. And people cheer for this guy. Again, Stockholm Syndrome. So, here, instead of actually going to discuss with Donald Trump, Mark Carney, Prime Minister Carney meets with Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. Today, the Prime Minister, this is from March 19th, by the way. Today, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, met virtually with the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. The council is comprised of leaders in business, innovation, and policy who, through their expertise, advise the Prime Minister and Cabinet during this crucial time in the Canada-U.S. relationship. During the meeting, Prime Minister Carney and council members discussed the current status of U.S. tariffs on Canada, including those that are anticipated to be implemented on April 2nd. They spoke of Canada's response, including counter tariffs, support measures for affected Canadian businesses and individuals, as well as additional measures taken by provinces and territories. You know what you didn't hear in that statement is going to negotiate. This is literally a clown show. This is a circus. That, we're going to get these business insiders to put counter tariffs on, put more pressure on, and increase the economical tension of this trade war, and make it worse for everybody. Make it worse for the working class of both Canada and the United States. Instead of just going to talk to the guy. For God's sakes, he's Mr. Art of the Deal. He responds to negotiations. So, who's on this list? Who's on this council member list? We thought we'd check this out. This is part of the same site here. This is from the Canada website, Canada government website. So, as of March 19, 2025, council membership includes Tabitha Bull, Martin Caron, I don't know, Arlene Dickinson. I recognize that name. That's the woman from Dragon's Den, I do believe. That's marketer. Tim Geisel, Wes Hall. I don't know who much of these people are. Rachel Notley, who's the former NDP leader of Alberta before she was ousted for Daniel Smith, who Daniel Smith, despite her qualms, despite things we could criticize about her, seems to be the most rational. And Daniel Smith was the one that went down to Trump in the first place and negotiated and made arguments of why you shouldn't put tariffs on Canada. And that got Donald Trump to put a pause on it. So negotiations do work. Talking to the guy does actually work. Despite what this Liberal Party, this charade, wants you to believe. And here's even a more fascinating name. Right there, Mark Wiseman. And we know who Mark Wiseman is. Mark Wiseman is the guy who came up with the Century Initiative. Mr. We need to flood the borders with 100 million immigrants to flood our population. Even though we don't have the services to meet the current needs of our citizens right now. We need to flood Canada with mass migration to get our population to 100 million people. Why? So it could drive down wages. So it can do more union busting. So it can cause more chaos on the streets. So there's more infighting in communities instead of actually going after these dirtbags that are responsible for this. And here's Mark Wiseman. Mark Wiseman, he writes his own articles. Do you know that? Mark Wiseman, who's part of the Century Initiative, that's telling Canada, hey, you got to open the floodgates. You got to cause mass migration, have a huge outpouring of your population without mentioning increases to services, increasing hospitals, increasing the need for schools. You just got to flood more people into this country because it will help the private-public partnership, as he says. Meaning that corporations can then exploit those newcomers for cheap labor, which is what's happening right now, which is why we have an immigration crisis. So Mark Wiseman says, after decades of success, there is no room for politicization in Canada's pension system. Check out my most recent opinion piece in the Globe and Mail. How would a former BlackRock executive, now NGO CEO, and Mark Wiseman's advisor have the time to write for the Globe and Mail? Why would he? Did he get hired on at one point to run the Globe and Mail? Oh, no. The Globe and Mail is a media partner for the Century Initiative. So, of course, the Globe and Mail, the same people that are running hit pieces on Pierre Poilievre, making false accusations and alleging that there's India interference with his campaign to try to discredit him, is also the official media partner of the Century Initiative. And there it is here. The Globe and Mail is the Century Initiative's official media partner and the exclusive partner for our national scorecard on growth and prosperity. I love how they put a little zing to it to make it sound more pleasant. Andy Lee says the Globe is the Century Initiative's official media partner. It is run by Mark Carney's advisor, Mark Wiseman, and is partially funded by Power Corporation, run by Carney's top donors, who also lead the Canada-Chinese Business Council. Foreign interference is alive and well. And no one says a word about that. No one says a word about the fact that your top national paper, the Globe and Mail, is bought and paid for by foreign interference because Mark Wiseman, the Century Initiative, and Mark Carney and all these other top donors are foreign investors. Foreign investors that are colluding with the media to publish articles like, hey, wouldn't it be such a great idea if we had 100 million population by the end of the century? How cool would that be? How cool would it be to have a flooding of migrants without any documentation? How cool would it be to just pick away a popular candidate? How cool would that be? How cool would it be to just make up a conspiracy to try to discredit our opposition? How great would that be? And there's the official documentation from the Century Initiative. Century Initiative announces partnership with the Globe and Mail. This is back in 2021. Century Initiative is pleased to announce a new multi-year partnership with the Globe and Mail. As our national media partner, they will help us connect with new audiences, raise awareness of our work and why it matters, and share evidence-based insights with the Canadian public. In other words, they're the propaganda piece for this NGO, for the NGO that, much like any other NGO, corrupts nations, run by billionaires, run by the billionaire class that don't give a damn about Canadian prosperity. They don't give a damn about working class. They don't give a damn about sovereignty. They want to tear away the Canada as a nation and make it an asset. That's what's happening right now. Now they have the Globe and Mail in their back pocket to push this bullshit, to push the propaganda. So, there you go. Mark Carney officially announcing that U.S. and Canada relations just are never going to happen. And the team that is responsible for trying to deal with this trade war are purposely the same villainous monsters that want this trade war. So they can attack the United States, so they can cancel this relationship, and that Mark Carney can then just occupy, with his globalist investors, occupy Canada instead of us choosing our own destiny and choosing our own identity and choosing our own sovereignty. Be bought and shilled by the WEF, be bought and shilled by the Century Initiative. So Canada's losing its sovereignty no matter what, whether you think it's coming from Trump or whether you're realizing that's people like Mark Wiseman and Mark Carney and Brookfield, the Century Initiative and the WEF and all the conglomerates that have bought and corroded, bought the politicians and corroded every ounce of democracy in this country.